Hello BookTube. Today for Tag Thursday, I'm going to be doing the My Book Buying History tag. This tag was created by Wiepke. Not entirely sure on the pronunciation, but I'll leave a link to their channel as well as Brian of Bookish's channel. This is where I originally saw this tag on his Saturday Hodgepodge. So there are only two prompts. Prompt number one, where do I get my books? So I'm going to go with a bit of a history. So going a little bit further back. So the first time I can remember buying books was through Scholastic. For Americans of my generation and maybe a little older, definitely a little older, and also obviously more recently, every few months a Scholastic, a publisher who specializes in children's literature, will send catalogs out to primary schools, elementary schools, maybe junior high schools or middle schools or intermediate schools or whatever they're called, that are usually 4 to 8 pages of little mini catalog where books will be on offer, and students can select books and obviously ask their parents for money, and then after a certain point in time the teacher collects the order forms and sends it off along with the money, and then a few weeks later UPS will deliver the books, and the kids in the class who ordered will have some books to read. And also every year Scholastic also does a book fair where a part of the school will be transformed into a sort of mini bookstore. When I was a kid in elementary school, the book fair was held in the gym, or not the gym, the auditorium, which was part of the lunchroom. There would be like at the front head of the lunchroom there was like a stage, and that's where the books for the book fair were. I'm not entirely sure where the book fairs are held now. I would think probably in the library or another auditorium stage setting. The particular elementary school that I went to no longer exists. It was demolished probably like 10 years ago, unfortunately. Although it had been about 10 years since it was actually used as a elementary school. But anyway, so that's the first time I kind of remember buying books, was through the Scholastic catalogs and book fairs. And then also on in person, there was, when I was a kid, 2 bookstores in the local mall, B. Dalton and Walden's, that we used until Barnes & Noble came, which had a wider selection because it was a bigger building. It was on its own, and it was about 2-3 times the size of Walden's and B. Dalton put together. So we shopped there until I went to college. And from there, I pretty much defected to Book People, the big, wonderful, iconic independent bookstore in Austin, Texas, which made a lot of sense because it was incredibly easy to get there. Just hop on the bus that ran along Congress, stop off at 6th Street, and then walk from 6th and Congress to 6th and Lamar, where Book People is, and go shop and then walk back. Brazy and I spent much of my time there. And then when I went to Portland for a weekend for a conference, obviously there was Powell's, where I went twice. And then there's another little bookstore I found walking around downtown Portland, which amazing. One of my favorite activities when I'm in a big city is just walking around. So I went in there and I picked up Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Edward Albee. And then when I was in San Francisco, there were so many bookstores, primarily used. So the one new bookstore I went to, I don't remember the name of it, but it was kind of off market, near where there was a Virgin Music. And because I think it was like a 2-store chain, like there was one in San Francisco and one in Berkeley, and they're both gone now and have been gone for at least 10 years. I mean, that's where I picked up some Foucault. I went through a Foucault phase in my early graduate career. And also Accession by Ian Banks, Perdido Street Station by China Miéville, and Fake, which is a manga that I don't remember who wrote. And it's been a while, and I only read the one volume, and I didn't particularly care for it. And then also in San Francisco, there was another bookstore that was closer to Embarcadero, like more to the coast, that I think I went into once before I left, but I don't remember having picked up anything. And then then there was a different light on the Castro where I picked up, I want to say, an Alan Hollinghurst novel or two and a few other books. And then as far as used books go, there's a used bookstore on the campus of San Francisco State University. There's like a little book sale room in one of the buildings, and I discovered it and just had a blast picking it up, books up. That's where I found at Swim Two Boys, my collection of Hesiod, and I want to say the Argonautica. And then there were a few other used bookstores in San Francisco that I went to, that I don't really remember the names of and whether or not they're even still there. And then coming back to Central Texas, there's of course Barnes & Noble, although by this point Barnes & Noble mostly began to sell Nook and Nook accessories. So that kind of put me off of them. Hastings, which was a general all-purpose entertainment store, much like I would say Newberry Comics is for Steve and Mark. And there I picked up some used books, some comics, some manga. This was during my manga phase. Golden's, where I would pick up some used books. And one of my favorite used bookstores, although I haven't really gone there for a while, Brazos Books, which is another used bookstore that I've gone to a few times. Of course, the Friends at the Library book sale that the Friends at the Library put on twice a year. One's a mini sale where they sell just fiction, and then a bigger one in the fall that I absolutely love. Hopefully they're going to have restart them this year. I know there was a mini book sale at a farmer's market a few weeks ago, so if that's any indication, then there's going to be a bigger one in the fall. And obviously the library, I've used quite a bit, although not so much lately with the pandemic. And then there's Amazon, which is like my primary go-to online book buying, where I buy most of my books, or I have. Although with the pandemic, I also switched to supporting more independent booksellers, book people. I came back to and Powell's because they had. I saw an article in Oregon Public Broadcasting's website that Powell's was in some difficulty, so I decided to buy from them and support them, and also a independent bookstore in Waco, Fabled, which while I've never physically been in, I've bought a few books from. And of course, Book Depository, that's where I picked up all of my copies of the Legend of the Condor Heroes series and a few other books that are either difficult to find in America or will fit some of the smaller shelves on this bookcase, and more specifically this bookcase here, because there's one shelf on here that really is a tight fit, and really only the mass market or kind of like the shorter end of the trade paperbacks fit on there. So, and I mean, I do quite enjoy getting the bookmarks too, and I do love Book Depository, as well as Alibris. Alibris is a used bookstore website that brings together a number of independent sellers that I've bought from several over the past years. Originally it was Better World Books, and then a combination of Hippo, Discover, and Owls, and then a half-priced Alibris itself, who I'm not entirely sure if they're just a discount new bookseller or how they work. And then a few more, Midtown Scholar, Powell Chicago, and on and on. And I've also more recently fell in love with ordering books from university presses themselves, namely Princeton and the University of Chicago. And I'm kind of tempted to also try out LSU. They have a sale on that's been going on for a while that there are a few books from them I want to pick up. And then also, hopefully at some point, Oxford, when they have a good sale on too. So that's pretty much where I've been buying my books from. And I'm hoping at some point to start physically going to bookstores again. I hope, I'm kind of hoping I can go to Golden's this coming June. They have a sale on the first weekend. Although we'll see how I'm feeling and how whether or not my brother would want to take me, and then of course the Friends of the Library book sales, and of course buying pretty much how I've been buying. So anyway, that's my book buying history. Prompt number 2: how do I choose the books I get? Lists, recommendations, cover buy, etc. Generally all of the above. So I would say the primary way I've lately been picking up books is through book hauls from professional book critics, namely Steve Donahue, who pretty much, not infrequently, do I add a huge amount of the books he gets in to my various wish lists. Primarily history, but also some general fiction, even though my relationship with general fiction is what it is, and occasionally science fiction and fantasy. Also Thomas of SFF 180, who is a professional reviewer of science fiction and fantasy novels, and he does a mailbag every few weeks that's usually interesting, although when I'm a bit down on science fiction and fantasy, I'm not as invested as I usually am, which is kind of like I'm in a lull period regarding science fiction and fantasy right now, along with general fiction. And Peg at the History Shelf, and booktubers in general always sort of have interesting books on display. Also, the occasional book review journal. I subscribe to the in my New York Times book book review, and so I get like the Friday overview of what's in the Sunday book review, as well as I get a Tuesday one too. That's just a little quick one. And they usually have some books I'm interested in, and I also catalog and surfing the web and all sorts of ways. So yeah, so that's my book buying history. So if you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged, and I will be back tomorrow with weekly reads, where I will talk about The Triumph of the Moon by Ronald Hutton, as well as The End of Everything by Matt Wall, because I'll be reading that tomorrow. And then before then, I think I'll do a Pride TBR, or possibilities for that, and see how that goes. So until tomorrow, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.